which Gulfstream Race 3 is the first race we're going to talk about today.
Yeah, and let's take a look at the lineup of the races that we are going to talk about today. We're going to talk about races from Gulfstream Park, Tampa Bay Downs, and Aqueduct. We're going to cover 6 races over the course of an hour, Emily. So things are going to kind of come at you rapid fire as you get a look at the lineup of the races there. But the one thing that we talked about a little bit last week, everybody has their little bit of different handicapping techniques. I like to work off paper. You go off a lot of the optics notes. It's a lot of trip note taking and then a lot of what you see on the screen. And we were able to watch a couple of races earlier on in the day from all of these racetracks. So we'll see how things unfold throughout the course of the day. It is a big weekend at Gulfstream Park. It's Pegasus World Cup weekend. That's going to be our feature race that we talk about at the end of the show. So make sure you stick around as we do talk about the $3 million Pegasus World Cup. It's a really good field, Emily.
Absolutely. A good day of racing
really
all together. So, yeah, I'm excited to kind of dig into that. But first.
Yep. Let's go right to Gulfstream. Let's kick things off here with the start of our racing day and kind of how we unfold things for racing. Now, last week was the first show that we did together, Emily, and you made a really good point when you talk about handicapping races. Let's identify the favorite first and identify how you work off the favorite and if it's a horse you use or a horse you look away from. So you're looking here at horses in the paddock for race number 3 at Gulfstream Park. And Emily, let's start with the favorite. That's the 2, Corduroy Road. This is a horse that's a pretty heavy favorite right now, sitting on the board. I believe it's 6-5, so pretty heavy choice. What do you make of Corduroy Road, and then how do you work from there?
Yeah, so the thing is, a lot of times assessing the favorite is you want to kind of understand like why this horse is the favorite and why the public is gravitating in that direction. And as an individual coming in from Woodbine, those synthetic races stack up on par as far as speed figures in class, so they have the right horse in that spot. And I think players too, a lot of the players that are using the paper pass performances will look and they'll see Marty Drexler, who's a top trainer up at Woodbine, just a top trainer all around. But here at Gulfstream this year, I kind of pulled a different stat, one I'm going to kind of work off of, is the barn has sent out 10 runners so far this meet. They've had just one winner that was a synthetic runner. There hasn't been any runners on the dirt, and this race being on the dirt, and as far as Corduroy Road, it's a surface that's new, and the Gulfstream Park surface in general can be a little bit different. So you do have that as a hurdle for a horse that's a favorite. They're also likely to take some pace pressure in this race, just kind of based on the running style, as well as giving up some recency coming off that 56-day layoff. So as the favorite in this race, I see this race as a soft favorite.
I do too, and here's the thing about it, and you make a very good point about the pace of the race. This is a horse that's not going to get loose and lonely on the lead. It looks like the horses that are sandwiching it on either side of the horse, and Cactus Jack and Earth, both can kind of push things along early on. So that was something that kind of opened up things for me a little bit too. So we mentioned we have a vulnerable favorite here, currently sitting at 7-5 on the board. You start looking around a little bit in the field. And for me, a horse that jumped off the screen was actually that one right there. That was the 8 on Captured King. If you're looking for a price, just based on the running style, this is a horse that's going to settle back early on, come running at him late in the lane. I think it's a horse that if you do get a little bit of a race that falls apart pace-wise, maybe can get into the mix. When? I don't know. Maybe looking underneath in the gimmicks, that was a horse that jumped off a little bit to me. Who are some others that you thought you could work around here in the 3rd at Gulfstream?
Yeah, I mean, the approach in general is when you have a vulnerable favorite, you can start making cases, especially the 8 right now who's 25-1.
Yep.
You don't really have to pick that many holes, right? Because you're getting price compensation, especially when you have that softer favorite. So, it's kind of typically, again, I'm not trying to pick that many holes. The track profile 4-6 furlongs on the dirt at Gulfstream Park tends to lean towards horses that have tactical speed, but again, there are always exceptions to a rule, and you have to understand the type of scenario. So to your point, if they do heat up, it could come from a horse from off the pace. Number 3 Earth and number 5 Ben Copenhagen, these are the 2nd and 3rd choice currently in the betting. The 5 is on there warming up right now, and the 7 was also broke off into a warm-up. It could show some speed, and I think both Earth and number 5 Ben Copenhagen are logical alternatives. I'm making a crazy case for the 6. Kind of have to do a little bit of work on this one because currently the longest shot on the board at 40-1, this is the type of horse that sometimes you get long shots that the public's just missing something. This one is more of a legitimate long shot, but they have back numbers that would make sense. And there's buried form, and the horse is a flow upgrade, was sitting up close to a fast pace, going a longer distance of ground last out. And so there's some things to like, again, with those back numbers that the horse can run back to. It was a strong race on December 30th, and it's going to come back to the claiming condition where the horse has been competitive in the past. So just kind of trying to get, again, creative outside the box. The 6 is a horse that I used, as well as the 3 and the 5 a little bit. Because we did want to also kind of slightly mention race 4 to play some doubles, which I did play some doubles into race 4. And I'm mentioning that in case people want to kind of tail or get involved, or at least, consider for those multi-race. And I'm going to make a case for the number 5, just kind of waiting for the page to pull up here. A horse called Rio Moon. Now, as far as the debut, that was a stronger field against Maiden Special Weight Company. And then that November 23rd race, I'm not one that picks on the chart colors. I think the chart colors do a great job, and I'm in solidarity with them as workers. But there isn't a mention of the trouble at the start for this horse, and it was significant trouble. The horse not only got bumped out of the gate, but a few strides out of the gate was bumped hard, checked, and dropped back. And you can see that part on the running line, and the horse did come running late, and kind of just as far as the physicality, has some turf characteristics. So the fact that those factors are in play. Now, there's also another kind of interesting twist, is the 2 horses that bumped the 5 on either side came back, and both of those horses won.
Right.
And both those horses came back and won and recorded an 81 optics figure. Now, an 81 optics figure stands out in this field from that perspective. So it's hard to compare apples to oranges, but just kind of keeping that in mind, there is some upside there. The rider for this race, Kingscote, is a European rider who's riding Gulfstream this year, and a very good overseas rider. He won with the 2022 Epsom Derby horse, Desert Crown, and also run a multiple Group 1 winner called Brown Panther. So we know he can ride the turf, so I'm making a kind of a long shot case for that horse, so I'm spreading in this race and already have that double in.
Yeah, and they're listed as 1 minute to the third at Gulfstream. We know it's going to be a couple of extra minutes there, but when we talk about strategy for races, Emily, you make a good point. Sometimes you want to look at just that race as a whole. Sometimes you want to look at multi-race wagers. Maybe it's just a double. This might be a good spot where you do look at the double because you have a decent-sized field here. You have a relatively large-sized field for the 4th, and when you get these rolling doubles at racetracks, I really like that offer of a rolling double, because you may not like a pick 3 or a pick 4, but if you like back-to-back races, you can catch some value there. So
and you can see,
right, you can see what the will pays are exactly.
Absolutely. So you can really kind of price shop around and see if there's some overlays or just something that just you got to play just based on the number. So,
right.
Or see if horses are live. You can get a lot of information out of the doubles and looking at that pool and on the live feed.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And you can find out if there's somebody that they like in the next race, who they're betting early. You get kind of a little bit of a preview. We always talk about that at Hawthorne with pick 3 will pays and pick 4 will pays, kind of getting that little bit of a head start on races too. Now, when we talk about races, there's going to be times, Emily, that we're going to land on a horse that is that heavy favorite, and we may say, hey, this is the horse that's going to be the winner of the race. When you get in those situations, maybe that's a horse you single on in a multi-race wager. Maybe that's a horse that you try to tie a couple of nice long shots underneath and hit an exacta. So it's not like every race we're going to say, oh my gosh, this is a bad favorite, because that's not always going to be the case.
Correct.
There's times, though, when it is going to happen, and those are going to be the times that you do try to beat that favorite and catch a little bit of value, and this just happens to be one of those instances.
Yeah, and I'll expand on that and kind of back up a little bit. When we talk about assessing the favorite, that's what you're doing, right? You're assessing that favorite for their strengths, their weaknesses, and how you're gonna play that horse. Is it a horse that you're playing against on top? Maybe I'm going to try to beat it on top, but I still think they're logical to run second or third. That's a little bit different than I'm trying to take a stand against this horse. I don't think, I have a very vulnerable favorite that I think this horse is going to run completely out of the money. Those are probably races where you do want to get involved in the trifectas, exactas, superfectas, because you have that edge in a particular race. So in this particular race, did you kind of have a strategy on how you're playing?
You know what?
Win bet on the 7. I mean,
so for me, right, the 8 would actually be my play here. The 8, yeah, on Captured King, only because I felt the inside 3 horses all could play for an honest pace. So when I do look at something like that, and you get value like that, I would probably back it up and play win place. I don't play a whole lot of show money, but I would probably play win place, knowing that, okay, 18-1 is good. Back it up in the place money. There's nobody else I really loved in this race. So this would be a race I sit on that single horse. You're looking at some multi-race type of options. options here with the doubles, so we'll see what happens. Now, Emily, for those that are tuning in for the first time to Club Hawthorne Live, you're going to see as the race is going, we're not going to give you the call of the race because we may throw some comments in there, and it's only to try to help everybody out a little bit. We like to take a lot of trip notes on races. There's different things that we see, and you mentioned chart callers have a very tough job. They're trying to make a note on every single horse in every single race. They're not going to catch everything every time either. So you go and look and see what you get off the screen there. The 7, for example, Awesome Beach was a little bit hesitant to load. That's something that you may want to watch. You see what you get out of the break of the gate. So if you do hear us chiming in, Emily, for those tuning in, it's by design. It's stuff that we may want to point out during the course of a race.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, differentiating between taking trip notes and chart comments is the chart is really designed to be historical, right?
Yep.
When you're taking trip notes and you're looking at this race, you should be thinking kind of the bigger picture of what's going to happen with this horse next time. What happened in this race that could impact them going forward, whether that's negative, neutral, positive, you know, whatever those factors are. So we got the 2 off a little bit slow.
There you go, your favorite breaks last. And that's a horse that was supposed to show a little bit of speed.
Yes. The ones out there, which I'm not as surprised about, getting pressured by the 4. The 4 kind of got used for position. The 7 is stalking wide. Again, those are all kind of horses that somewhat projected to be forwardly placed for the surface and distance. The 6 is out there wide in that second
2's in a world
flight.
of trouble here.
Yeah.
There you go, steady into the turn a little bit.
The 3 is tracking right behind, kind of getting a good trip in there. The 8 is stalking off the pace, but that's sort of where we projected that horse to run.
But here's the thing. You're 3 across battling for the lead with 2 others right behind. This is the type of race that gives you the potential for someone hopefully to come from out of it.
Yeah.
I mean, the favorite's been very disappointing to this point. We'll see if that horse can run out at all here.
They went almost 23 for that first quarter. The 3 looks like they have tons of run. Your 8 has some run.
Saved a little bit of ground, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go with this 6 on the outside. That would be gorgeous.
6 is running on a little bit. The 8's going to try to split horses here and dive to the inside. It's not a bad effort out of the 8, even if the horse runs 4th in here, which it looks like it's going to be.
Yeah, the 2's now just starting to run on late. But again, having the information as far as the 2 and the surface and the barn tendency, because I know, stats to me, again, it's so much situational and what you want to pick and what you want to draw from, and just kind of pulling up that recency. I tend to use recency a lot more for stats, and just kind of seeing like where the barn is spotting their horses and where they're running, and noticing this isn't quite the right spot. And so when you have that going on with a short price, you're going to have some possibilities. So it was 4. The 6 ended up running 3rd at 60-1. The 3 got in there.
Second.
The 3 had some trouble, but again, a good race right there.
And here's the thing: the main thing was identifying that vulnerable favorite. That was one in there that was very vulnerable. I don't even know if the horse got up for 4th. It would have been a head bob for 4th. So
yeah, it's pretty tight.
Yeah, we'll see there. All right, we're going to shift over to Aqueduct here. Race number 2 at Aqueduct. I'm going to take that as a positive for us in the first race at Gulfstream, only because we went with the identification of finding that vulnerable favorite. And now here in the second at Aqueduct, Emily, you look all the way to the outside. The 7-horse Melting Snow is a horse that has speed, comes in off a big figure in that last out. This is your 1-2 favorite in here.
Yeah.
So what do you do here with a horse like Melting Snow in the second at Aqueduct?
So going into this race, I kind of thought the horse could be a little bit as a softer favorite. Now, I understand why this horse seems like the most likely winner of this race and coming off that most recent effort. But I watched the first race, and the 5 looked to have a pace advantage as far as the way the race shape was, and the top 2 finishers came from off the pace. Now, they were the first and second choice in the betting, so it's not like it's that unusual of an outcome. But as far as the 7, they do project to be forwardly placed. There are some other horses in here. And then the thing that really kind of, I pulled up the chart for that January 5th race that the number 7 Melting Snow won dominantly. And the horses from that race were not necessarily, it's not a strong field that they beat. There's 2 horses that came back from that race. I want to make sure I have the chart in front of me here. One of those horses did win next out. Where did that horse finish? I'm not quite sure. The 4th place finisher came back and won, but they recorded a 59 optics figure, which is pretty low. The 2nd place finisher that finished a distant second behind Melting Snow came back to also finish second, but again, recorded a 59 optics figure. So the 7 really wasn't beating much that day. Is going to face a stronger field today. it could take pace pressure. Maybe the track profile isn't in their favor. So it could be a spot where certainly this horse could win. It's not a horse I'm running out to bet or single at that short price, out currently 1-2. The 6 is the second choice at 3-1. I thought the 6 was a solid, logical contender in this race. Making the change in class, has run at this level, going 2 back when it was the Belmont and Aqueduct meet, is second off. So seems like they have this horse in the right spot, and if the 7 does come up a little bit short, that horse should be in the right spot. I also upgraded a little bit to the number 2 Blue Paint and number 5 Diva Banker, those 2 coming out of a common race back on January 8th.
Here's the thing about the 7 horse too, all right? You're looking at a heavy favorite in here, Emily. Look at this horse. This horse was claimed in 6 straight races, one of those being a voided claim in that start 4 races back. Now, that was a voided claim at Saratoga for $32,000. They come back off the void, think, okay, we're going to try to get the horse in for 16 and maybe sneak it by off the void. Didn't work. The horse got claimed. Then the horse gets claimed for 16, and they drop it for 10 off the claim. The horse wins, but that's a spot where you have to win because you need to get the pot and get claimed just to get your claim price back. Then they go back up for 16 and claim again. Now Rudy brings the horse up for $32,000. Here's the thing. That's a pretty significant jump on a horse that's a heavy favorite. Rudy Rodriguez also has the 5 Diva Banker in here, a horse that you talked about in this spot. And this is a horse that might get a pretty good trip in here. Blue Paint, a horse that could press things a little bit early on. I think you're right. I think you could look, again, amongst some other horses in this race, and we're not saying that Melting Snow can't win, but again, this is a horse that has some question marks along the line, and now you're trying to double the price off the claim, and you're looking at 3-5.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I know they don't like to say, you know, past races or whatever, but that is something when you're playing that you do have to talk about if we're being honest. So maybe it's a race that, okay, I like the 7. I'm not crazy about the prices on any of the other horses. I don't see value. You know, keep that in your mind. I do think that I think the 6 is fair odds.
Yep.
In my opinion, as the second choice right now. And again, those other 2 horses providing alternatives. But yeah, the 7 is not a horse. If they win, I can easily turn the page and move on.
Right, I'm with you on Royal Megan here. I mean, I hope we get 5-2. I think 5-2 provides fair odds. You hope for that 3-1, but again, 4 times at the distance, 4 times on the board. Some horses don't like 7/8. That's a kind of that middle distance there between that sprint and starting to get to a route. This is a horse that likes the distance. This is a horse that likes the track at Aqueduct. This is a horse that's getting a rider who's ridden very well throughout the course of the meet. We talked about this last week, is sometimes you get some of these more experienced riders in races that have guys that haven't ridden the track as much, and the experienced riders get that little bit of a benefit. So you do have that here with Royal Megan too. I'm going to go with you in this spot, and we looked at things differently. I'm looking on paper, you're looking at the optics notes, and then going off what we've seen for history of some of these horses. I think Royal Megan's probably the play in here too, and maybe this would be an option where you try to tie it up with some of those other horses that you mentioned underneath at a price. Maybe the 2 Blue Paint is one, maybe the 5 Diva Banker. I think, again, you can at least take the effort here. 3-5 provides no value, so unless you're completely awestruck by the horse and you want to play multi-race wagers, I would also stay away from Melting Snow and look to some other horses in this spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like we've got kind of a good handle on that one as they start to head towards the gate, start that loading process.
It's chilly there, yeah.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to follow this race as well, just in terms of that track profile to see if it's playing. Again, there's those 2 horses that came from off the pace in the opener.
Yep.
Being the first and second choice, it's so hard to be like, oh, it's a closer friendly, because you're like, the results are logical.
Right, exactly.
You know? This horse looked like it had a pace advantage, but maybe they're just not good enough. Like that's the way it goes.
Yeah.
So we'll get them a little bit more of a sample in this race.
And I agree with you. I do think you get a little bit more of an idea here. Just make note after this race. Next race we'll have a little bit of time too, as we'll be coming up to the 3rd from Tampa. So we're going to talk to some of the folks over here at Crazy Pour in Villa Park a little bit about the venue and some of their offerings as they get loaded in. You're seeing Blue Pink and a little bit of assistance there walking into the gate in this spot. But again, like you mentioned, in the opener there was a horse that figured to make the top there, Emily. Made the top, but wasn't able to run on. Melting Snow figures to make the top here. Let's see if the horse can run on. It is hard to determine if you have any type of a bias early on throughout the course of a race day, but maybe we'll get a little bit of an idea here. Melting Snow was an easy winner for 16,000 in that last out, but again, you're shifting
Stepping
barns.
up.
You go over to the barn of Rudy Rodriguez in
Stepping
here.
up in
We'll
class.
see how this horse runs as the last horse is walking in the gate here for the second at Aqueduct.
And they're off. So the 7 is being hustled for the lead from the outside. And the 4 is going forward as well to kind of keep this horse honest up front. Maybe they're going to take back on the 4. So the 7 is out there.
Let's see what they get for the opening quarter. Because you're right, the 7 did have to push and hustle a little bit, and isn't making the top easily by any means.
No, and the 4 they kind of aren't really trying for the lead, and they're kind of sticking in there. 23-1 for that opening
so
quarter.
not overly quick.
And yeah, the 2 is chasing inside with the 5 stalking outside. I mean, the 7 really shouldn't have any excuse from here, all things being fair and equal. But we shall see as they make this turn. There hasn't been much movement from the back.
No, 6 is starting to move a little
2
bit.
is
That horse
starting
we
to move
talked about.
backwards. The 6 is starting to move. The 7's backing up a little bit. It would appear.
This would have to be a big effort out of the 6, only for the fact that the horse has raced wide the entire turn, so lost some ground the whole way through.
And the 5 seems like they're being ridden along, but the 5 could still get there, especially kind of how it played in that first.
And here's the thing:
interesting
even if the
stretch
7
run.
wins here, to not have a gimme at odds of 4 to 5 is something that's a little scary. The
absolutely.
5's grinding, even the 6 is grinding with that wide trip. It looks like the 7 is going to emerge clear.
Yep. But had to work for it. It was not an easy win for a 4 to 5. But like we said, we can accept the outcome and turn the page.
And here's the thing, though. The other thing that you have to understand, and you talk about too, we're looking at 6 races in an hour. We may not play each and every race, and it's hard to say, okay, pass. We're just trying to look at different options, different strategical ideas for how you want to look throughout the course of a race there, Emily. But the 7, that wasn't easy. And when it's 4 to 5 and you're just coming off a 10-length victory at the distance, it's supposed to be a little bit easier. I'll be curious to look back at the chart and see if the horse gets claimed out of that race.
Yeah, they might be. Well, they stepped up, so yeah, it'll be interesting.
And if you're the connections there, you're overjoyed probably getting claimed if you do for the 32 out of that race after claiming for 16 in the last. The one thing, too, you look back at those results as we look at them crossing the line again. The 5 was the horse that ended up finishing 3rd. So trainer Rudy Rodriguez there ends up finishing 1st and 3rd in that race. And the 5 was a horse that they claimed for 25,000 out of the start, 2 back, and jumped up for 40 in that last. So dropped down just a notch in there. But a pretty good race there for Rudy in this spot. So we'll see kind of how things unfold. Again, we're coming from Crazy Pour here in Villa Park. This is Club Hawthorne live on our YouTube channel. Emily Gullikson, Jim Miller joining you. As always, Emily, we're on Twitter. If people have something that they want to hear us talk about, something they want to see, they can jump in on Twitter. You posted a pretty awesome picture a little bit earlier to talk about just what it is. Height differential ride when we're not sitting on chairs. That's a little bit of a difference.
They should go on Twitter for that alone, let's be honest. That is worth the price of admission on the Bird app.
It is. It's one of those things when I interview riders at the racetrack, we have steps in the winner's circle. I usually like to put them up a couple of steps just to give them a little bit of a head start to even things out a little bit. Some of my past hosts that I've had in the paddock at Hawthorne, we have cinder blocks there too. So they'll stand on a cinder block to try to make things a little bit easier as well. So we're going to have some things coming out, just some of the folks from Crazy Pour joining us too. Emily, we're 10 minutes to post for today's 3rd at Tampa. Why don't you set that up quick while the folks from Crazy Pour are going to bring out some items for us too. What do you see here, just briefly looking at your initial impressions for today's 3rd? Amanda.
Maybe I'll wait. I'll show respect and wait.
What do you have for us, Amanda?
I don't want to drink.
Okay. Well, I may try it.
All right, good.
Want to bring some food out? They're bringing food out. See, this is what I love. This is the best part of the show to me, Emily. So we mentioned I'm very tall. I like to eat. I enjoy stuff. What do we got here?
We got a couple of specialty cocktails here. We have the Leo's Envy. It's similar to a Long Island, but it's made with a melon liqueur. And then we have a Weekender over here. It's a sweeter drink. It's made with some pineapple, cranberry, Malibu, some amaretto. We got a beef roll here, so it's Italian.
Massive.
I know. It's Italian beef, mozzarella cheese, wrapped up on our pizza dough, topped with a garlic butter, a little bit of Parmesan, served with your choice of sides. And we got a slow roasted beef brisket sandwich here. It's slowed for about 16 hours, topped with a barbecue sauce, and served with your choice of a side.
Now, Crazy Pour is a pretty awesome venue here, Amanda. And you look through the facility, you have so many beers on tap.
Yes.
It's an awesome setup. Massive TVs behind us. And most recently now, the addition of the PointsBet Sportsbooks. You guys offer a little bit of everything, huh?
Yes, we do. So the PointsBet is obviously newer. It's a newer addition here, but I'd say it's probably one of the best things we got. I mean, you could come in, watch any of the games, especially on Sunday with football. It's one of the biggest things we can do. You can bet at any game, sit at the bar, have some drinks, some food, hang out with your friends, and then if you win, you could go get the money right away.
Well, and that's the cool thing, too. And the one thing, too, and Emily and I have talked about this for some of the venues, to be able to incorporate sports and racing into the venue, everybody has their little bit of comfort that they want to find. So there's the OTB setup back there, the restaurant here, the PointsBet Sportsbook, but people can kind of spread out and just kind of pick what works for them, huh?
Yeah, so we offer, I mean, we put up all of the odds on a lot of the TVs. We have a lot of the horse races on the TVs. So majority of the time, there's always something on for everyone. You know, you could go over, like you said, to the OTB and you could sit over there. You could sit at the bar. We got them up on the races up there for you as well. So, I mean, there's also the slots. Some people love those. So there's a lot of stuff for everybody here.
So here's the cool thing about it. I love the fact that I have Emily alongside and she knows her racing because I get to dig into some of this food. I love eating. It's so cool. But when you look through the menu and you look through these drinks and that, there are specials each and every day, right?
Yes, there are specials. So like today we have the beef brisket on special. We also have the 8-piece domestic bucket. So you could do a Miller Lite, Coors Light, and you can mix and match any of those in there. And then we also have Captain Morgan on special, and Captain's only $5. But every day there's a different special. We got pizza going throughout the week for half off, 3 to 6 for happy hour, and then we have a lot of our specialty drinks that are just mainly just shown on the menu because I mean, they're delicious, all of them. And I always make them with a little extra love.
I love that. Amanda makes them with a little bit extra love. Amanda, thank you so much for bringing this out here and for coming out today. This is awesome. Like I said, when we get the picture-in-picture, I'm going to be eating some of this stuff too. So, Amanda, have a great afternoon. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Amanda.
All right, Emily. Now we have horses on the track for the 3rd at Tampa. So this is going to be the part of the show that I love because I'm going to get to sample some of the food while you talk about what you see in the post-parade. It's a little bit of an interesting race because I'm looking up at the board right now. It doesn't look like there's a real heavy favorite from what I see on the board.
The
This is a
8,
pretty good betting race. What's the 8 sitting at right now? Always 7 to 5. Okay.
Yeah. The eight figures to be favored. I mean, it's taking a class drop. The speed figures on paper stand out over the others as far as what they've run. So if you are kind of looking to go against the 8 in this spot, it's like the 8 is a horse that this is probably where this horse can win, but there's always those concerns when they're going to ship and they're going to drop, whether they're looking to get rid of this horse or place the horse where they can win, or sometimes it's a 2-for-1. So I'll just kind of note some of the second-time starters in here, maybe some horses that have a little bit of upside, maybe try to work those horses in, or some lightly raced types in this case. As far as number 4, Don Cinco, this is a horse that was green on debut, broke slow and outward, moved inside, kind of showed some interest running on after the wire, and actually finished in a blanket for show. And sometimes you don't see that when you're looking at that running line alone because it'll show 5th, beaten 10 lengths. And from a physical standpoint, should be fine to run on the turf. As far as the 5, comes out of a common race on December 3rd, a common race with number 2, Siciliano, where Siciliano broke slow. And Dad's on a roll, was wide, and was not asked for run after losing ground. Number 6, GTO, is another second-time starter in here, another one that was green on debut. And that's noted, especially for these horses being big prices, is it kind of looked like they wanted to see speed on GTO. They kind of used a little bit, were unable to get the lead. So could show a little bit more speed now it's in this second spot. Did show a little bit of run in there, was not asked for best behind the open-length winner of that race. And outside of that, I feel like there's one more in here I'd want to mention. Oh, the number 9 Miro. So number 9 Miro is another long shot in this race. They've been looking to run this horse on the turf, and from a physical standpoint, looks like they can handle the turf. Now, I just don't know how good this horse is, but it's so hard to tell off those first 2 starts because they never asked this horse for a run. So maybe a bit of a wild card in there, just kind of looking at some of those lightly raced types.
Yeah, and these are those tough races. It's kind of bottom of maiden claimers on the grass. There's a lot of unknowns. There's a lot of lightly raced horses. Like you mentioned, horses that may be trying to get to the turf that finally are able to get to the grass, or they maybe had a little bit of an issue in that first start out and things turned around a little bit. So when you're looking at the board right now, like you mentioned, Rock Chalk, just based on figures alone, yes, this is a horse that is the logical favorite there, and rightfully so. But a great thing, like you mentioned, the 5, Dad's on a roll. Okay, this was a horse that in its debut posted a buyer of 2. Okay, you'd look at the debut and say, oh, well, you know, I have to completely toss that horse out. But here's the thing. Had the outside posts of an 8-horse field. Gets Lasix for the first time, so likely bled in that race. You're coming back here for a trainer that has done well on the grass throughout the course of his career, and you look at the board and see that this is a horse that's getting a little bit of action off a debut where the horse took a little bit of action. So if anything, at least the connections and some of those that are pretty wise know that this is a barn that can do something with horses, even though the first speed figure wasn't a whole lot. So sometimes you have to look just beyond what you see for a number regarding a race too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for those reasons are the reasons why they're sort of sitting in that third choice spot, is because people are kind of looking at the connections and feeling like, okay, well, they've done this before. They feel at least safe. Maybe this horse can move forward. And there's really no, like you mentioned, there could be any number of excuses for that horse. And watching the horse just from visual standpoint, not being asked late, could certainly show a move forward. So it's one of those times where you just can project a move forward. It really comes down to what are now the acceptable odds.
Exactly, and that's where you have to talk about your acceptable odds here, because here's the one note I made when I was looking at the 8 Rock Chalk. This was a horse that raced at Gulfstream Park on the turf for maiden 35 in that last out. First Lasix in there, was sent off as the favorite at 5-2. Okay? There are ample turf maiden races at Gulfstream Park where this horse could have chosen to run at, but no, they're going to go over to Tampa and cut the price in half. So again, you tend to wonder with some of these vulnerabilities, because this is a horse that, if you thought a little bit more, this was an OBS purchase for $50,000. Now they're running for 16 here. So there's a lot of things that I would tend to wonder, it scares me a little bit. Maybe you can try to find a little bit of a price in this race.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I mentioned, there's kind of those two factors when you see that type of drop, is it could have the red flags attached as far as, we're just trying to, maybe get the horse claimed.
Right.
Or maybe the horse isn't quite right, because you are finding not only just that drop in class, but the drop in purse that comes with the circuit, right? So where the 8 was running for $35,000 in their most recent start, today the purse is $15,000.
Right.
These are significant drops.
Yeah.
Now in that case, we don't necessarily look for the 8 to necessarily move up, because speed figure wise, they're already running faster than any of these horses in this field. So it's like, if this horse runs back to those efforts, they are the most likely winner. Now, as far as the timing, I think that's probably a positive, because they are coming back in 3 weeks. If it was like a drop off a layoff, or those types of things, that's when you start going like, wait a minute, something's not quite right here. Again, I'm not, 3-2 doesn't seem like it's much of a bargain, but when we do talk about assessing a favorite, I think that this horse is probably in the right spot where they can compete. And they have tried some different circuits. They had to kind of move the horse away and outside. And then you can even make an excuse for that most recent race at Gulfstream Park, given the rail draw and the way the race shape's set up. Played against that horse from a race flow standpoint, because they went very slow early. And then to the credit of Rock Chalk, they did show some interest running on late against that dynamic.
Yeah, so we'll kind of see how things unfold. Like you mentioned, if the horse were to win and get claimed, the connections get $25,000 out of this race. Again, this was a $50,000 purchase. Who ran second at Saratoga on debut. I would probably go maybe Fisherman Oscar in here, maybe Dad's on a Roll, like you mentioned, or GTO, some of those. We should make note, horses are on the track for the 4th at Gulfstream Park. That's going to be the next race that we hit here. It is a long walk up the chute there at Tampa. They are going to the turf at Gulfstream for the next. So we're going to have a little bit of time there. We'll get to that field. That's a really good betting race. It's kind of a wide open field. It's a big field. But looking at this spot here, I think you have to choose one of 2 different routes if you're playing this race. If you believe Rock Chalk is just going to be the best horse, maybe that's a horse you look to multi-race gimmicks. If you think you can try to defeat it, especially now that you've lost some value here, Emily, with the horse all the way down to 4-5, there are some other horses that do present some options here that I do think can be threats here. So if you're kind of looking to play a race like this, and you don't have to give us a bet by any means, but what horses would you be working around here in the 3rd at Tampa?
I would be looking at some of those like kind of long shots, unexposed type horses, like the 9 I mentioned, like the 6 maybe, even though the 6 is now 10-1. Even the 4, just horses that just aren't exposed yet. The case for the 5, I think, is valid as well. So you could put that horse in there, even though maybe is a little bit short. As far as the 3, Fisherman Oscar, the odds are just a little bit short for a horse that's doing something new, but has that early speed, and that could certainly carry. So that would be an advantage on that front. But I would try to get real creative and real outside the box with some of those like lesser exposed second-time starters.
Yeah, and we saw Fisherman Oscar at Hawthorne early on in the course of the fall meet. That field was not great by any means, and I made in 25 back on October 1st. It was kind of a bunch. It wasn't a great bunch by any means. It was a race. Those are horses that I think some of them, if they were running for 10, probably would have gotten beaten too. So for that 25, it wasn't a great bunch by any means. Yes, you do see a second place effort on the turf. Watch, the horse will jump up and win now.
Well,
but
that
it
was,
wasn't
I
a good
mean,
bunch.
to that credit, the field quality and Fisherman Oscar had a perfect trip that day, and my note was actually the horse needed softer, that the horse needed a drop. So off a perfect trip. But even though, let's see, they're going to the gate at Tampa. We do have 3 minutes at Gulfstream, so I know we'll have a few minutes. Was there anything at Gulfstream just kind of while they're loading here,
the also eligibles drawing in. I love when alsos draw into a race, especially when they're horses that look like they can do something for a couple of reasons. Sometimes they're overlooked a little bit on the board, but also if a trainer feels it necessary to treat the horse with Lasix, if it's a Lasix horse, to wait that time to get in a race and see for scratches, they mean that they want to run in that spot. That was a destined spot. 2 alsos drew in there, the 13 People Force and the 15 Cyclone Ranger, and they're both providing a little bit of value. So when we get to that, I do think it is something that you can focus on a little bit. But I like that move when a trainer is willing to sit around and wait for an also eligible to get into a race.
Yeah, so we're I think we'll have a few minutes to talk about Gulfstream as they're going in the gate at Tampa, and we'll talk through this race. We're just waiting on the 10 right now.
And 10 is Noble and Kind. The horse that you probably put a line through that last race, a race that was taken off the turf and didn't show a whole lot.
That horse didn't show much run in the race before. I really couldn't find an excuse for that horse in either of those 2 starts.
Right, so this is interesting at Tampa because they come out of that chute and then make that left turn. So early on in the race, you have to try to find that position a little bit when you're going into the first turn there. So we'll see kind of how things unfold here.
And that looks like what they're doing with the 3, sending that horse out there, which is the one we kind of projected. And there's the 5 again, showing a little bit more speed, a better position today. We'll see if that horse can stick. The 10 is wide, chasing behind, and same with the 7, where the 1 is getting the ground-saving trip behind.
Someone's blowing the turn
looks
there.
like maybe the 7, that kind of blew
that's the first timer, right?
Yeah, first-time starter.
So, and here's the thing, they're listing the turf course as good today. I'm curious to see what the opening fractions are, because usually it means there's a little bit of give to it, but looks like they're kind of moving along, at least for this level, but we'll see what happens when that opening quarter comes up as a 3 Fisherman Oscar, a horse that we talked about, who could show some speed, is kind of cruising along in the front end. Actually looks a little bit washy there up front, though.
Yeah, and that's not uncharacteristic for this one. The 8 looks like they have run. They're kind of covered up and free, but you can just kind of see the energy of this horse, that they have some run.
Yeah,
so the favorite could be a big threat as they're starting to find some run. Looks like the 10 is going to start to move behind around the 3 and the 5 as they come into the turn. The 2 being not necessarily the second time
here comes
starter,
that 5 a little bit.
Yeah, the 5 was in that great tracking spot the whole time, so could certainly get
really
a pair.
no excuses here for the 3 who was able to make the top. Again, we don't have the fractions, so we don't get to see kind of how things unfold, but this was a horse that was able to get over and cross over and make the lead early on. We'll see what happens. The 5's battling in between, and that horse was a price.
Absolutely. It was 10-1. And the 10 showing a little bit more. We got the favorite on the outside. Let's see if the favorite ends up, having that kind of class edge. And somebody's closing there. It'll be kind of tight at the wire. The 8 gets up.
Right, so you
6
see a
got
blink.
Second. That was one of those price horses. That second-time starter in there, getting second, closing ground for second.
So the favorite does get the job done there, who we expected probably should have based on numbers all along there. So that's a horse that ended up going off as a heavy favorite. But let's shift over to Gulfstream Park here as Gulfstream lists themselves at 0 minutes to post right now. We know we have a little bit of time here as we're going to the turf again. We're at Crazy Port here in Villa Park. I want to dig into this food. I'll get to it eventually. Don't worry. I'm going to make sure that we test it. I'm going to share with our TV crew, who's absolutely awesome. Nate, Matt, and Jason doing a great job here. So we will jump into that in a little bit. But Emily, 4th race at Gulfstream Park. Looking at the board right now, it looks like the 10 is your favorite in here. I thought this was a relatively evenly matched field. What did you see for the 4th at Gulfstream?
Yeah, so going to that pattern where you start by assessing the favorite, I think the 10 is pretty logical in that role. They had legitimate trouble last time out. It was probably best in that race to finish second. So I really have no knocks on the 10 from that perspective. Seems like a favorite that fits that role. I made the case for the 5 earlier. You might have to hit rewind to go back there, but just based on his trouble trip last out, 2 next out winners with a horse that made contact, and a jockey from overseas that's a very competent rider. Now, as far as some of the others in this field, I know you are making a case for the 2 also eligibles. Yep. Now, does the outside post bother you over this course, and kind of like where they break? Does that kind of weigh into, like, you know, whether you kind of like those horses? Do you
Sure.
kind of feel like you want to be compensated in odds, or do you just think they can kind of get a trip with their running style?
You make a good point, because I think you have to be, especially based on running style. You look at the 13 People Force, this is a horse that probably has to be committed to the front. So from that outside draw, you're going to know 4 or 5 strides into the race if this horse truly has a shot, because they're going to have to be on the gas from the get-go. Hope that they get a little bit lucky with some of the inside speed, maybe squeezing out of it a little bit too. And this is a horse that tries to clear over. The 15 Cyclone Ranger I like a little bit more in here. So this is a horse that has a little bit of a stalking style. It was a good effort in that first out. Look at that race. Tyler Gaffalione rode there. Junior Alvarado listed today. Junior was also listed on the 12 Read On, but you see who his first choice was. It was the 15 Cyclone Ranger, so he sticks with that one. Gaffalione moves over to Read On in here. But that's a little bit of a sign, too, again, when you're looking at a rider, that this is his horse, the horse on the Alsos. You're getting 6-1, and like you mentioned, the Alsos, sometimes you have to work out that trip from the far outside. It's not the greatest spot to be in. I like the value, though. It's a wide-open field. You're looking at an even money favorite in a wide open field here, too.
Yeah. The 15 is currently 6-1, is stepping up in class a little bit from that maiden 25, and especially in terms of race par. This is a little bit higher, and that was the concern with the 2. Is a horse that's a little bit bigger price in here at 18-1. That horse ran a better than looked effort last out with some trouble in that second place finish, but again, it's a big step up in class just as far as race par. We have the 8 who also ran kind of similar. At a similar level, is a little bit washed. He didn't have that noted in there. So, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of like going through this field, liking the 5 a little bit more in here. The more I kind of, okay, if we just have sort of one horse, one big contender, one horse to beat, and this 5 can show some run. It was 23-1 when they went in the gate.
Yeah, like we mentioned, let's see what the outside horses do in this spot.
7 is acting up in there. It looks like this. I thought it was a 7.
Yeah, I think it was a 7. But the outside horses probably both have to try to go there to get that position. You can see it's kind of tight on the turf with the rail out, too, as they're trying to keep the inside of that turf course good for the Pegasus tomorrow. But as they break for the gate, we mentioned the 13 has to go. It looks kind of like there's a cavalry charge for the front, though.
Yeah, the 12 sending there to go 3 wide with the 7 and 8 to their inside. The 13's going to be able to tuck in very smartly behind that first flight. The 15 is a little bit wide. The 5 is right behind that first group. And it seems like now they kind of all shuffled for position. The 13 is still in a good spot, kind of no cover second flight. The 5's getting some shuffle in traffic while the 12 ends up making the lead. The 8 is sitting a good trip, kind of a free pocket trip. The 7 getting over to save ground with the 10 on cover. The 3 is inside, being able to save ground on the outside, and the 9 kind of stacked wide behind that 11 out in front, sort of sitting mid-pack. We can definitely see it there, kind of the position of the horses, and going pretty even for that opening quarter, about 24 flat.
No brutal trip really for anybody here. I mean, like you mentioned, the 15 hung a little bit wide in that spot. We'll see if the horse has any run as it's trying to move up in the red silks. You mentioned the 8 was getting a great trip. This was a horse that's a massive price, too, but actually got a dream trip positionally in here.
Yeah, it was sitting right behind. Not a great trip for the 5, but not showing as much as I was expecting, so might have to be another day for that one. But we'll see coming into the stretch. The 10 is wide. That's the favorite. But they might be able to have some kick as they're coming into the stretch. The 13.
And then that's that 13 in between horses,
one of those AEs. The 10 is on the left lead. They'll try to get this horse straightened out, and if they can,
12's coming out a little bit there.
Yeah, it's going to be tight. Ooh.
Yeah, that's tight, and that's a hard wire to judge because you're going off the rail more than anything. So we want to see. We'll see what the replay looks like there, because I think it was a little bit tighter than what you see kind of for how they get for the gallop out. The 3 horses involved. The 3 horses involved are the 10, 12, and 13.
Yep.
So horses that we thought could all be factors in there. The 10 was your favorite at 6-5. 12 was 5-1. That's the one that Gaffalione jumped on, the speed horse there. The 13 was one of those also that we talked about that I think the rider actually did a pretty good job.
Excellent job.
You mentioned coming out of the gate, Emily. This was a horse that when 3 others went for the lead, this horse actually chose to take back. The rider took back and tucked in. I think that was a really good move by Ortiz.
Yeah, and you know, It wasn't even so much that they grabbed. We see so much of like the riders grabbing is they just kind of let the horse just kind of fall into the momentum and let those other horses. Yeah, I think it's 12. I think 12 stays
12,
on
13
the,
are the two,
on
yeah.
the inside. Lets the horse go, and you kind of just love to see that because it lets the horse just kind of find their rhythm, and they ended up, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but at least you don't get into that pulling match with the horse. It ended up getting kind of a good spot, tracking right behind. No real excuse for that long shot 8, just might not, maybe it is the 10, I don't know. I'm so bad at this.
It's very tight there, but yeah, the 10, 12, and 13
that
are,
like 10,
that are all right there.
No, back to 10, I don't know, it's a tough one.
Yeah, we'll see what we get price-wise there. We're going to head over to Aqueduct, though. We'll let you know on the results from the 4th at Gulfstream, but we're coming up to the 3rd at Aqueduct here, Emily. And this is a race that they're 1 minute to post right now. Your favorite at 4-5 on the inside is the 1. That's Vax. This is a maiden race, so you do have some kind of unknowns. It's only a field of 6 in this spot. But again, a maiden who can show some speed on the inside. They're staying right at the same level, shortening up a little bit off that last out. The race 2 back, though, for Vax was at today's distance, Emily, and that was a pretty good effort, too.
Yeah, it was a very solid effort. They showed a lot of grit that day, and then took pace pressure. And I just off the visuals, I preferred Vax over Sweet Liberty, who they were both pretty tight on the morning line. But I think the public sorted that out. I didn't feel like the 3 was any value at 2-1. A little bit kind of one pace. So as far as the horses that have run, sometimes I'll attack these maiden races from that perspective. Is start with the horses that have run. Try to get through those, and then, as much as I think that Vax is sort of the best of those horses that have run, not totally sold all the way. The 7 is a horse that I wanted to mention. This is a second-time starter coming in from Laurel, where they were taking on Open Company, and could be a possible upgrade from the debut. Now, the trainer won just a couple days ago with a 59-1 shot over at Penn. That was on January 25th, and they don't run a lot of horses at NYRA. Only one horse last year, and it was 11 furlong horse on the turf, and it was on a 6-day turnaround. So it's kind of interesting that they shipped this horse in. They did have one maiden back in 2020 that finished second. So I felt it was kind of an interesting horse of the sort of kind of lightly raced, lesser exposed. And then you go even deeper as far as the lightly raced, lesser exposed horses. And you can give a look in this case to the first-time starters in here. I preferred the 4 a little bit over the 6, but the public seems to prefer the 6 over the 4. So, either way, they're new faces that I in this field, I have a hard time knocking either being those new faces.
Yeah, looking back at Gulfstream Park, order of finish 12, 10, 13 there. So the 12 read-on was able to get the job done. A little bit better price there at 5-1. You mentioned here in this race at Aqueduct, I think the 1 Vax is probably the horse that you have to look at in here. This is your heavy favorite. There are people that like playing favorites, and sometimes if you have the favorite who's just the best horse, that's the route you go. I think this could be the route here.
Yeah, exactly. It really kind of just stays on our schedule of like you're assessing the favorite. You're looking at the race and saying this is the horse to beat. The horses that would scare me and pose a threat to the number 1 are just the horses that I just don't know. I don't know.
And that's the question.
I don't know what the 4 can do. I don't know what the 6 can do. The 7 could even move forward. I just don't know. The other horse in this field, I feel that Vax has them handled. So, from that perspective. And so those are just things you think about in terms of this horse being a favorite. You can even kind of go one step further as far as maybe if this is a race where people kind of see it the same way as Vax is a legitimate and a heavy favorite. A lot of tickets, I haven't looked at the rest of the sequence, to be fair, so I'm just kind of setting up like a generic scenario where maybe a lot of tickets would single a horse like this. And maybe it is a spot where you do try to kind of go, all right, maybe I'll just take, that creative because I just don't know. Maybe I just don't quite trust Vax all the way, knowing that the rest of the public is really going to kind of sink their teeth into him.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Right, and that's what you have to look at. You talked a little bit about the 6 gracefulness. Trainer David Donks had himself a very good start to this meet. Out of the first 14 starters, 9 have found the board, 4 winners. He's a guy that wins at about 11% clip first out. He does good with horses all age. He's also been very good with horses on the grass throughout the course of his training career. But he's a guy very well respected, and you're getting 10-1 on that horse. So I'll be curious to see what gracefulness shows us in this spot. Vax would probably be a horse that, if I were looking at multi-race wagers, maybe this would be my single in the spot. Hopefully the horse runs to that. The 6 it's a big, good-looking horse. But again, first start out here for this 3-year-old filly. A little bit hesitant along the gate, but nothing that really would scare me off by any means.
So that's for me as a player. I will sometimes think of that and that's why I mentioned of looking at a race like this and thinking this might be a race where people do take a stand with the one.
Right.
And fundamentally, like that makes sense. But if you're trying to like win money, and especially in a pari-mutuel where you're playing against other people, if you're like, okay, I know they're gonna zig in this spot, I might just try to zag, knowing that I'm taking a risk in that sense, that I'm not necessarily trying to beat this particular horse, but I'm trying to beat all the people that are on that particular horse, if that makes sense. So it's again, it separates the handicapping from the betting. Is you're just trying to think, you're now handicapping the public. What are they going to do in this type of scenario? And if I'm outside that box, those payouts in those multi-race are just going to be huge. But again, you have that hurdle. You still have that horse to beat.
And here, Sweet Liberty is put ahead in front of Vax. We'll see if Vax can dig in. Right now, I'm not loving the looks of the favorite by any means, although it looks like these two horses are going to be 1-2. Sweet Liberty's actually almost trying to pull the intimidation factor a little bit there by lugging in. Let's see what happens going down the lane, because Vax is trying to battle back.
Yeah, Vax is battling back. The 7 has some run, but just might have a little bit too much to do with the 16th of a mile, but they're going to put in a run. It's going to be ding-dong. Let's see if it's 3,
right,
if
it's a battle
1.
all the way to the wire, head and head here. It looks like Vax probably going to emerge clear in the end.
Absolutely.
But here's the thing. Now, again, you look at a race like this, Emily, and let's talk about this a little bit as we still have a little bit of time before our final race, which is the 4th at Tampa Bay Downs. You can look at this race from different perspectives. If you're a tournament player, and this is a tournament race, you probably have 2 options. You either sit out this race if it's an optional race, or you have to zag trying to find that price there. Now, if you're somebody who's just betting that day at the races, then it might be different. Maybe you find a horse like Vax and say, I'm going to play a multi-race wager and see if I can kind of carry myself through where I'm not exposed for one race, but I have action for races going on. So it depends on what kind of a player you are, what the setting is, what the sequence is, because you mentioned this is pari-mutuel. You're betting against everybody else. You're not betting against the house by any means. So there is that strategy based on what you're looking to gain from the race too.
Yeah. And again, I think it's just, we mentioned this because it's just ways to think, right? Everything is situational, but again, we're giving like some ideas of how to actually play in scenario. And I'm surprised. That was a good run from the 7.
Yeah.
Not quite as good as I needed, I'll be honest, but I'm okay. I would, kind of no regrets in that situation. Again, kind of identified that Vax was the preferred over the 3, so kind of no real surprises there.
No, I mean, kudos to Vax, honestly, because like I
dug
mentioned,
in.
the 3, I mean, this was a horse that was laying on Vax a little bit at the top of the lane, was right there alongside. Oftentimes, that outside horse is going to be the one that emerges clear in the end. I think the track at Aqueduct through those first 3 races played very evenly throughout the course of the day, too, and Vax was just able to emerge clear. You mentioned between the 2 horses, you thought everybody had the right favorite identified. And as you see there, it was close, but yes, that was the right horse. That was the right favorite. Between those 2, 4 to 5, it doesn't provide a whole lot of value. But again, if it's the winner, that's just that's the route you have to go sometimes.
So again, yes, and as we talked about last week, if you're kind of looking for exotics, like certain horses you're going to key, and certain horses you're going to sort of fade, just kind of depending on the odds. But yeah, a lot of credit for Vax because around the turn I was like, oh my gosh, this horse is backing up, and I should give credit to Jose Lozano as well. I mean, it was a never give up type scenario. I can't believe we only have one more race.
I know we only have one more race.
Well, one more race, and then we're going to talk the Pegasus.
Right, we are going to talk the Pegasus next. Our last race is going to be the 4th at Tampa Bay Downs. Again, we're at Crazy Pour here in Villa Park. We have this awesome food out in front of us, the brisket special today. We have some great drink specials as well, so there's so much to check out. Next week, the show goes on the road over to Joliet, our OTB location at Joliet. The following 2 weeks, we're going to be in Crestwood. So if you want to tune into the show live, come and visit us, say hello. We will happily say hello to you. Emily sticks around a little bit after the day to talk some more wagering strategy and that throughout the course of the racing day. But we're going to have these different shows. And Emily, tomorrow, it's going to be a whole lot of fun. We're going to be out here. I'm going to come out. You're going to come out. We'll be at Villa Park. Howard Kravitz, Kyle Roscoe, Matt Miller, Breeders' Cup Betting Challenge champion, are going to be here for a pool party. We're giving them $1,000 to bet with, Emily. Last time these guys did it, everybody paid $35 to get in, right? The crew made $5,900 off their wagers. Everybody walked out with $150.
And a full belly.
Right, exactly, and that's the thing. You talk
they're well
about
fed here at Villa Park, that's for sure.
The food here is awesome. Everybody's going to get those food options. They're going to get a program. They're going to have that chance to be a part of that betting pool. And these guys also, they do a great podcast. They do a great job kind of talking about the races. So they're going to be doing that live as well. So they'll be talking about their strategy throughout the course of the day. Matt Miller takes this very, very seriously. He's been working hard already on this. He's going to feel badly, I think, if people aren't walking out with money, don't you think?
Sure, yes. I know he puts a lot of weight on his shoulders, and just, a really great, all of them. And they're just such great people. I've had the joy of meeting them since I moved out here, and I've been attending the live tournament. So if nothing else, I just think people should come out and meet people if they haven't, or some of the people that maybe you know from the social medias, to come out. It'll be a good time, and I mean the racing is just going to be top notch. No shortage of quality tomorrow. Those stakes races at Gulfstream, we've got the Southwest at Oaklawn. Just all over. It's going to be a good time. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and the cool thing about the pool party, it starts around 2 o'clock, maybe a little bit after. It's going all the way through the Pegasus World Cup. So these are guys that are going to get to pick and choose their spots. They're going to put their homework in. They're going to do a whole lot of work and try to find that value and try to build that bankroll. It gets loud. It gets exciting. They tell you what the bets are ahead of time, and it's not going to just be, okay, I'm going to take this horse and just put a few bucks to win on it. They're playing with $1,000 bankroll. So they have that ability to spread a little bit in multi-race wagers. They have that ability to key on horses. I followed Howard throughout the course of the Breeders' Cup. He put together Pick 6 tickets on Breeders' Cup Friday and Breeders' Cup Saturday. There were really good prices throughout the course of those. And then there were places where he took a stand, and you have to do that at times too. But they're not afraid to put their necks out on the line. And that's the one thing that's really fun. It's the reason a guy like Matt has won handicapping titles, because you put your neck out on the line, sometimes you're wrong. But when you're right, you can be really right, too.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of that psychology, which we touched on last week, of not playing scared. That if you have an opinion and you're getting the odds that you think are fair or more than fair, you've got to pounce, right? Because those opportunities, as much as we like to think they're going to come up, maybe they're fewer and far between than we really expect. So the people that recognize when they have an opportunity, when they have an edge in a race, and they go for it. And, I've seen Matt play that way in the past, Howard, Kyle, the same. So, I'm looking forward to kind of hanging out, and always, anytime I'm around people, I'm learning something. So you can always learn more in this game, and I love that. Are we neglecting Tampa?
No, not at all. Horses are on the track here for the 4th
Perfect.
at Tampa as you're taking a look at the post parade. But like you mentioned, though, about learning, take what you can from everybody. Everybody has a little bit of different things that they toss in. You always go with your handicapping logic, too, but you can pick out some different notes from people and little things that maybe help your handicapping and assist that you don't have to dive real deep to find out about. Now, we're looking at the 4th here at Tampa, all right? This is one of those races that's tough. It's an 8,000 claimer, non-winners of 2 lifetime, a lot of horses that have had a lot of races, and only that 1 lifetime victory. So that's the thing that scares you a little bit, because none of these horses love to win by any means. Looking at the board right now, it looks like the 4 is your favorite in here, Elusive Uncaptured. This is the horse that the last race, it wasn't great. And this is another one of those horses, Emily, that's coming from Gulfstream over to Tampa and making that move. What do you make of the favorite, and where do you look in this spot?
Yeah, it's a favorite that this horse could certainly win. They have the back numbers, but I think in this case, because as you mentioned, it's just such a often unpredictable condition that people feel like maybe leaning on trainers and jockeys, and I kind of feel like that's sort of the case with the 4, because overall as a horse, the horse doesn't really have much of an edge, right? They're giving up recency coming off that layoff. As far as class, it's a lateral class move coming out of those 8,000 non-winners of 2. It's a different part of the season. It's not quite the championship meet yet at Gulfstream Park. So again, the class-wise is more of a lateral move, but it's a change as far as surface and distance. They haven't really been running this horse on the dirt. They did back in 2021, but kind of made the transition where the horse seemed to have a little bit more success on the synthetic. So it's not necessarily, it's a horse I can see winning, but certainly not a horse that I think is valued by any means at 2-1. Could certainly get the job done. A horse I thought was kind of interesting in here is the number 3. And King kind of back to that October 8th race where the horse finished second but had a lot of issues that day. Had trouble at the start, was wide, had to close. It was overall better than looked effort, and they've been working their way forward. Is in the third start of the form cycle and is actually kind of an upgrade from those races. And this was a jockey that I wasn't overly familiar with, and so I started watching because it's an apprentice rider that hasn't had that many mounts. And one of the things I noticed about this rider is they tend to be a good gate rider, getting horses out of the gate and into the race. Now finishing, I believe it's a Melissa, so I'm going to go with she. Doesn't seem like she's that strong of a finisher, but this seems like the kind of race where if I'm looking at Optics plot for this race, number 3 is a horse that has some tactical speed and is a square, so has finishing ability. So if they're able to kind of get this horse into the race, even though the rider might not be the strongest finisher, the horse itself has some finishing ability and just might have the first run on the other squares in this field, which is the 8 and the 5. And maybe just kind of falls into a trip. And it was a race where I just was kind of like, wanted to find a horse that was some value in here, and the 3 is sitting at 12-1 from the 8-1 morning line. I thought would be a little bit overlooked. And again, as a horse, you even go back even further than that October 2nd race, actually has numbers that are over a similar surface and distance with higher speed figures that stack up on par.
I want to go back to the 4 horse because you made a very good point that I think people overlook a little bit. You talked about elusive, uncaptured. You talked about the connections. Now, here's the thing. I make the line at Hawthorne, okay? When I make the line, I'm making it based off what I think everybody else is going to bet.
Which is how the line is made.
Right.
Correct, yeah.
And here's the thing. When you look at that, you have to take into regard, and I have to too, I have to take into regard if Jareth Loveberry's on a horse, if Chris Amy's on a horse, if Larry Ravelli trains a horse. These are horses that within the course of a race, and Ravelli's a great example. He's always going to take money because of the name, because he's had training titles, because he's won in the past. Chris Amy, 7 riding titles at Hawthorne. Jareth Loveberry riding titles. They take money based on name alone without anybody looking at the horse, and that could be the situation like you mentioned here with the 4 elusive uncaptured. Antonio Gallardo, a guy who's won titles at Tampa. Kathleen O'Connell, who's always won at a high percentage at Tampa throughout the course of her career. That's something that it's important. It's something that you have to look into, and it can just kind of impact what you see for a line and what you see for betting action, because a lot of people who may be going out to the track just for that day or something say, okay, I'm going to pick the best jock and the best trainer. That type of thing. It's important if you're watching and wagering races, you have to take that into regard sometimes.
Yeah, and again, I kind of think that's where they're going, because it's kind of just hard to find, sort of the horse, and that feels like maybe the safer option is to go with those more reliable connections because they have that. But now it looks like there's been a little bit of shift as far as the wagering, where the 8 is now the favorite at 2-1. The 4 is still sitting in that role at 5-2. The 1 and the 5 just dropped to 7-2. So this is a horse that also has some back numbers, but was doing so longer. And really the question about this horse is the current form cycle, because there hasn't been much excuse. And it is a trainer change, but it's the same ownership group.
Yep.
So it's not, it's more of a lateral move, I would say, in this case when looking at that. But has back numbers that would see this horse competitive on their best day. It's just kind of the current form, especially with the change in distance. Maybe that wakes the horse up, but again, you'd want some price compensation off that current form.
Now, the 8 was the one that I was looking to in here, and yes, there's not a whole lot of value. Currently at 2-1. This is probably the consistent horse in the race. Everything just kind of seems to be that same type of race. Here's the problem. If you're consistently winning, that's awesome. When you're consistently just getting beat, that tends to become a bad pattern. And you look back at this horse, you have to go all the way back to January of 22 to find that victory. Then after that, you kind of go through all these races and say, okay, it's second, it's third, it's second, then it's fourth, then it's fifth. And they're trying different things for the horse, but they haven't been able to get that second victory. So that was the thing that scared me a little. The rider, solid. Trainer, solid. The horses run pretty good over the track. You're going kind of that sprint sequence, and the trainer does well with this move.
Mm-hmm.
I think if I was looking at this race and I saw 5-2, 3-1, maybe there would be a horse that I would consider playing. Now continues to get bet. You're down to 9-5, so you have to make that determination where the value is and where the value kind of goes away too.
Yeah. I'll make a little play here with,
Yeah.
with the 8 and the 3. I'll put
Sure.
our ideas together and see what happens, and then at 16-1, some win.
Why
money.
not? Yeah,
some win money on the 3 as well.
Sure. I mean, let's try to beat that 4-horse. And again, the 4-horse could win, but this has kind of been that model of inconsistency type of horse throughout the course of recent races. This is the first start over this Tampa track, too. And we talked about this a little bit last week, Emily, where Tampa Bay Downs can be a little bit of a quirky track compared to some other spots. This is a track that in the past has been a little bit deeper. The way the track composition is, the way the turns are, they're kind of big, swooping turns there. Some horses handle it better than others. So we'll just have to see how things unfold for a horse that's coming over and trying this track for the first start out of its career. It's currently sitting at 5-2 as the favoritism has shifted over to the 8. Emily, I'm very surprised, though. Like you mentioned, you're looking right now at 19-1 on the 3 winner seller. That's a little bit interesting too, because you did mention when you have a bug rider here and bug riders at the gate, this is kind of the first thing that they're taught. Let's get these horses away from the gate. Let's get these horses in really good position early on, and a lot of times that kind of leads over to a horse showing some speed early on and being a factor from the get-go. So we'll see what we get out of Win and Seller as they head into the gate here. After the 4th at Tampa, Emily, we're going to take a look at the Pegasus World Cup as we close out the show, but this is going to be our last race here for Club Hawthorne Live, so we'll see how everything unfolds.
All right. Close out on a winner.
Let's do that. I mean, hey, if we get this,
today's been good again and again. I think the content,
Yep.
the content is what it is. It's very good content. It's good information. It's always fun anytime that you're able to get out here and join us. We've got a good environment. I know the way the camera's kind of set up today, you can't see it. Everybody's
That's fun, though.
far left, but it's kind of a busy.
they're able to see the
busy
massive
group in
TVs
here.
behind us, so that's
Yeah.
been cool. It is. This is a great setup at Crazy Pour. Again, the food in front of me, I'm dying to dig into the food. We will do so after we talk about the Pegasus World Cup. It's an awesome card at Gulfstream tomorrow. Again, pool party. Howard Kravitz, Kyle Roscoe, Matt Miller are going to be here at Villa Park tomorrow from 2 o'clock until the Pegasus World Cup. You can get in for just $35. You're going to get program, food, drink, a part of the betting pool. These guys made a ton of money in that last out, so we'll see how things unfold for the pool party. It looks like they're back in the 3 winner seller out of the gate here.
Acting up in the gate, so do not love to see that, but it seems minor. Rider stayed on.
This is the killer of having a track with a lot of trees in the infield. You
Yeah,
get nothing out of the pan
yeah.
shot out of the gate.
Well, the 3 kind of got bumped a little bit getting out there, but the 8 was able to establish position. The 1 on the inside going to kind of push.
All right, so let's see how things unfold.
The 4 is up there, and the 4 ended up
right?
and the 4 ended up going off as the favorite at the end, and is sitting in a decent position. Is between horses, pushing the pace. The 8 getting that outside tracking trip, which isn't always a bad thing here at Tampa, kind of staying in that clear position.
Right.
3 was eventually able to establish position on the inside, so we'll see where they're able to work a trip from there.
22 and 2 is pretty quick too.
Yeah, it is. So, yeah, this is for this distance.
For this,
sure.
for this distance and this level, that is pretty quick up front. So let's see if the 1 and 4 can go on. The 8's moving forward a little bit here.
Yeah, and the 8 has some finish and also has some stamina
Yep.
on their side because they're coming out of that route race. So
He's scrubbing on the 4 a little
still
bit
in with
between
the shot.
horses.
Looks like the 1 is going to start to back up a little bit in there. The 8 and 4 are going to kind of turn.
I would take the 8 from here. Just looking
Yeah.
at the rider, asking the 4 already and scrubbing through the turn.
If the 3's able to stay on, the 4's getting tired, so this could be.
The 3's had
nice.
a dream trip here too. The bug rider's done a very good job on the
I
inside
wish
saving
they
ground.
had
Get
better
that 3 up,
finish.
Emily.
Come on, get this 3 up. Ooh, the 5 is scaring me. Come on.
The 4's not scaring me. It's going to be the
4,
5
sorry,
more
the
than
5
anything.
on the outside.
Yeah,
Come on,
right,
3.
right.
The
It's going to
3
be 8.
moves.
Let's see. Oh, okay. But here, so here's the thing that's cool though about it. All right, they went quick through the opening quarter, and we mentioned so the 1 and 4 were pushing things along. They both backed out of it there. One of them being the favorite. The 8 had the dream trip the whole way. Give credit to the 3. The 3 horse, the rider. I thought the bug rider did a good job because here's the other thing that happens. A lot of times riders, when a horse gets away from the gate a step slowly, they get excited and have to really hustle again in the race. The bug rider actually allowed the horse to kind of settle in early on and get a good trip. That's the thing where you're sitting there, you're leaning for the wire.
Liability, right? I was like, I know she's not that strong of a finisher.
Right. No, but you're right.
I
And,
needed a strong finish in that spot.
yeah, and that's the factor there. And I'm curious to see what that final price on the 3 was because you mentioned the 4 ended up taking over as the favorite there in the end. The 8 was the horse that was the winner and a pretty clear winner in that spot. So it was just one of those things that kind of the way things unfolded, and you mentioned stamina was an edge there, coming back to 7/8 after you're going a mile and 40. Let's see what the three was 16 to 1. That was a really good price.
Oh, well, no,
Hey.
no regrets on that play. I think
No,
I felt the
no.
right way, and just almost worked out. And again, it starts from assessing the
Yep.
favorite, being able to identify when you have those soft favorites, why the public is doing a certain thing. And I think that we did kind of identify that the public must have been gravitating towards the connections, because the horse, no excuse as far as
Right.
the trip.
And
Because everything was there.
So here's the thing. In 1 hour, we covered 6 races. We talked about favorites here, and we talked about vulnerable favorites and favorites that figured. The only one that we thought really figured was Vox over at Aqueduct, and that was a horse that was victorious. All the other favorites got beaten.
Well, the other 8 at Tampa, I
Did
believe,
he?
right?
Oh, that's
Yeah,
right. That horse
that
was the
one
favorite. Yep.
was a pretty solid
All right.
favorite as well.
So that's
Yeah.
the thing here. Favorites. All right. So 6 races, favorites ended up taking 2 of the 6. Favorites aren't a gimme by any means at any time. You have to assess things just to see how things unfold, and then kind of strategize what you want to do for wagers. Now, Emily, before we close out things, we do have a big race tomorrow. Now, this is a race at Gulfstream Park, race number 13. It is the Pegasus World Cup here. This is a $3 million race. It goes a mile and an eighth. This is a really good bunch. You get the full field here. And when you have these invitational races, you kind of have to figure out what you want to do in this spot, because it is an invitational. They compiled a tremendous field here. I thought this was an excellent race. What do you make of the Pegasus for tomorrow?
Yeah, it is. It is a very interesting race, and especially from a betting standpoint, because there is a lot of ways to go.
Yep.
And Cyberknife is the favorite for this race, and maybe we'll kind of start
Sure.
the analysis there,
Yeah.
just kind of keeping up the theme. A horse that's listed at 5-2 on the morning line, and seems like I don't think the horse is going to be much higher than that. Let me
Right.
put it that way. So, as a horse that's going to be favored, and again, one of the things that I was saying earlier, when you're structuring your tickets, you have to be thinking, okay, going into that last leg, Cyberknife is going to be on 95% of
Yep.
the tickets. If this is a spot where I can maybe find some separation, just keeping that in the back of your mind. So, starting that analysis. As far as Cyberknife, to me, I understand why he's favored. He's been running at the higher grade 1 races. He's been recording the strong speed figures, and those factors make him legitimate in this spot and giving him a slight edge over the other horses. But they still have to run the race. He still has to work a trip. He's drawn outside. He's coming off an 84-day layoff, which is a bit of a change from his races where he had been kind of running consistently. He's going to run at Gulfstream Park for the first time, which is a tricky track.
Yep.
It's kind of one of those things. So again, when you're making these type of little kind of nitpick type cases, I'm not doing it so much with a 20-1, but with a 5-2, you really start to look like, okay, it could be this, it could be this. You're really trying to look for anything of why that favorite could get beat. What was your assessment of Cyberknife?
Yeah, Cyberknife, you have Florent Drew, just won his 2000th career race, so congratulations to him there. Like you mentioned, first time over the track. That's something that leaves some question marks here, and this was a horse that wasn't working over the track either. Had the works down at Fairgrounds, so
Correct.
You have to get accustomed to how things may play for the racetrack. Outside draw for a horse that I think wants to get into the race a little bit early on, and this was a horse that in that last out, it surprised me a little bit that they chose the dirt mile over the classic. So that was the thing that scared me a little bit. If the horse was coming out of the
Very good
classic into
point.
this spot, I probably would use Cyberknife in here. I actually stayed away from Cyberknife in this spot. There were a couple of others that I looked to that were coming out of races at Gulfstream Park. Now, the 7, Skippy Longstocking, was a horse that kind of came on late throughout the course of the 3-year-old campaign last year, but posted some pretty good efforts. You won the West Virginia Derby, and everybody's like, oh, it's the West Virginia Derby. It's not much. That actually was a really good race in there. Simplification came out of that race and ran a pretty good race, too. The race in the last out for Skippy Longstocking, it wasn't the greatest of trips. It was hung wide pretty much the entire way and ran on late. I thought this was a horse that you have to question. That was a career best figure, career best race, I think, for the horse in that last out. I guess the question is, Emily, do you think a horse like Skippy Longstocking, basically it's 4 weeks off that last race, can you repeat that performance? That's what we kind of have to determine.
Well, it's not even a repeat, but he does have to improve as far as what I'm looking at, especially he's stepping up from grade 3 to grade 1. And that was really kind of my kind of concern with him, and I think he's going to be maybe a shorter price in here. I
Yep.
might have been a little bit off, but he could end up being the second choice. And
I agree
as
with
a
you.
horse, he's been that kind of overachiever because he kind of took a while to get going. He was like racking up those minor finishes and then started to post some stronger speed figures. Now, as far as those stronger speed figures, you can, they're a little bit different because they're out longer distances, or like in the West Virginia Derby where they just don't run a lot of 9 furlong races. But to me, with Skippy Longstocking, I think he's a very honest horse, has the kind of the right running style for today's race shape. But again, he's going to be one of those horses that's tested for class, because when I look at his races where he was running in the Pennsylvania Derby, the Belmont, and the Preakness, you can kind of make some subtle excuses for trip, but just kind of overall visuals, he just didn't seem like he was on the same level. So that was sort of my one, again, because I'm picking this horse apart because I'm thinking, okay, he could end up being the second choice in this race. And if there is that class vulnerability, maybe he's a shorter price horse that's like, in that second rung of contenders.
Sure. Now, there's one other horse I want to bring up, and then I'm going to leave it to you for the rest of the race. White Abarrio. And here's the reason I want to bring up the horse. 4 starts at Gulfstream, 4 victories over the track. Nothing on paper to me says the horse is fast enough to be with this field. But, man, it's hard to overlook that this is a horse that likes the racetrack. You're going to get a price. It's 10-1 in the morning line. I think the odds should probably be higher. I think the horse should be 20-1 if it's even worth the play.
Oh,
did you make?
Will you book me at 20-1?
Well,
is your window open?
Good. That's the question. Did you make a case for this horse?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good.
And again, like for the most part, the data that we have at Optics is kind of coming from. They all kind of come from Equibase, from the same source. So we have mostly the same thing. Now, as far as speed figures, Daily Racing Form works on Buyer. We have our own Optics figures. So if I'm looking at Optics figures, he's he's certainly fast enough.
Sure.
I ran a 106 last out. And then just in terms of class, he's been able to compete and run, even if he's not winning type efforts at grade 1. Now, he did win the Florida Derby, which is a grade 1, but it's restricted to 3-year-old company. And you mentioned he's a horse that likes this course. He has a favorable running style where he can sit up close to the pace, and then he can finish. And he's also getting Tyler Gaffleon back aboard. And this is a rider that, for the most part, has ridden this horse very well. The Derby, not a good ride at all, but keeping that in mind, you can draw a line through that. If you want to go back and watch the replay, the horse has just never had a chance with that trip. It's a complete excuse. And then to his credit, he bounced back. So I think White Abarrio is a solid contender.
I'm glad to hear that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think 10-1's fair.
Okay,
and
good.
My heart rate just went up when you said 20. I got very excited for a moment there. So I think he's a very solid contender.
And maybe it is 10-1 because of 4 over the racetrack too. Just you look at some of these other horses that ran these bang-up races in that last out. That was the reason why I thought maybe you're going to get a little bit more of a price. Is there anybody else that you want to touch on here in the Pegasus?
Well, one of the things I'll mention, just because I'm doing it live, maybe it can bring a little bit more explanation to it, since we put it out on Twitter, and then we talk about having experience over at Gulfstream Park, I think is key, because it is kind of a quirky track. Sometimes horses take to it, and we almost see the opposite, where when horses run well at Gulfstream Park, sometimes they have a hard time transferring their form out of Gulfstream Park. So a horse like number 6, Art Collector, has never run at Gulfstream Park, and I think that people will see that as a negative, and I'm kind of seeing that as an unknown, because if I'm looking at this horse and where he's raced, he's never run during the January to May months, and that's when they run those peak races at Gulfstream Park. So I can't necessarily say, well, he hasn't run at Gulfstream Park, because he hasn't run ever during that season. So the fact that they are running here, that they are picking this spot, that this is the spot that they picked coming off that 119-day layoff, which kind of tells me a little bit in terms of intent. He's been working down in Florida. He's going to, run for these connections off the layoff. Mott's had this horse for the last couple starts, showing that early speed. Early speed could be key over this Gulfstream Park course if he is getting brave enough on the front end, if he gets back to his back efforts. Now, he does have to get back to those previous efforts that would make him competitive, because my partner at Optics brought up the point, he hasn't quite shown as much punch and as much early speed coming off the layoff at Saratoga this year, or last year in 2022. So he would have to run back to those previous efforts, but kind of making that case that if they are bringing in a fresh horse, a horse that's well met, a horse that has numbers that would make him competitive, you know he's going to be up there early, so you don't kind of have to worry about, traffic issues. Sort of made that kind of wild card case for him, and I think he'll be a price. I think he's going to maybe get a little bit forgotten in this race.
I think so too. I mean, Bill Mott off a lengthy layoff. He's 22%. This is a guy that you have to give consideration to anything coming from the barn. All right. Pegasus World Cup for me, I probably will look to Skippy Longstocking. I'm going to use White Abario in the mix. Are there horses and who you may just kind of focus around for this race? What are the horses that you look to?
So, touching on those two,
yep.
And then, you're right up, and I think both I agree. Simplification is not a horse I really see as a strong contender, but maybe has the right running style for a pair. I wanted to like his last race a little bit more, but I thought he kind of hung and didn't change leads, which is sort of a pattern. And then another long shot, a couple other long shots. I think Last Samurai might have the right running style to get a share underneath. It's sort of the best of the closers. But number 11, Stiletto Boy, might just be kind of intended for this race because he's second off a layoff. He's been training at Golden Gate Fields, and that's sort of when he's kind of home. Mike Smith is going to come in to ride. They've been in this race before.
Yeah.
He's a good horse at 9 furlongs, and he should be another horse that's a big price in here. And then number 12, O'Connor, I think is a horse that we might not have seen the best from yet, but is a horse that really needs some price compensation because he's going to have to improve. Though his effort in the Harlan's Holiday, that common race, was a kind of sneaky good effort.
It was a sneaky good effort. Here's the thing that you come out of this race with. It's a very good race. It's a very competitive race. See if you can find some value there. There are a lot of options. All right, Emily, that's going to wrap things up for us for week number 2 here of Club Hawthorne Live. Again, looking ahead, next week we're going to be out in Joliet. We're going to be out there, that location next week, followed by a couple of weeks at Crestwood. So there's a lot going on. It's kind of the moving road show here. So we're going to check out some of these different facilities. I'll tell you, though, Crazy Pour, this has been an awesome venue for our first 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. The other venues, we know they're nice. They're going to have to bring it because this is such a nice spot.
It is.
It's so nice. We'll be here tomorrow.
That's right. We will be here tomorrow, and we're going to be here for a great reason. There's a great pool party tomorrow. Harold Kravitz, Kyle Roscoe, Matt Miller are going to be here for that pool party that's taking place. They're going to have a $1,000 bankroll that they're going to get to play with throughout the course of the day. They're going to do their podcast live. Emily's going to jump in with them. I'm going to jump in with them a little bit. I'm going to leave all the betting to them because they're doing all the research. These guys cashed for nearly $6,000 off their bankroll last time out, Emily. So it is something. It's a lot of fun. Great food. It's only $35 too.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. I've actually been looking forward to it for the last couple weeks, to be honest. Talk to those guys out at the tournament. So yeah, it's going to be great.
It is going to be great. It's been a great time here at Crazy Port in Villa Park. Again, we're at Joliet next week, but we're going to wrap things up for today. For Emily Gullikson, for Nate, for Matt, for Jason and our TV crew, John Walsh over here watching, Dakota as well. I'm Jim Miller. Good luck to everybody all weekend long for your wagers, and we'll see you next week on Club Hawthorne Live.